So, I've decided that I'm going to make my favorite food, and I call it Spaghettini Français, or French spaghetti. Don't really know why, it just kind of, I guess a colloquial term, and that's just what we call it in my family. But basically it's pasta, tomatoes, olives, and garlic all together, and it's, like I said, one of my favorite foods of all time. Let's get started. Alright, so let's get started. We're going to be using a lot of cherry tomatoes. Of course, I'm going with the organic kind because I like organic food. So there's no point in really taking them out of the box. I can just rinse them in here since I'll probably be using all of them. I'm making at least 2 portions worth, so we'll just give them a quick rinse here in the sink. Let the water drain. There we go. Nearly dropped a few, but that's okay. And we'll just put them here on a towel so we can dry them. Into the recycle that goes. And then we have some peeled garlic ready to slice and some organic Kalamata olives. Some of my favorite kinds of olives. And without further ado, let's get to cutting. We're just gonna cut everything in halves. And watching my older video back, my other video, I realized that it's kind of useless filming myself cutting stuff from the right when I'm left-handed. So hopefully this angle should be a little bit better. I'm just going to start by cutting every single one of these tomatoes, even the little ones, in half. And that's it. That's all the prep we're going to do really for the tomatoes for the time being. Once we finish the tomatoes, I'll cut some garlic and some olives. Normally I like to do fairly even amounts of tomato and olives, if maybe just a little bit less olives than the tomatoes. However, when it comes to the garlic, although I like it a lot, we don't want it to overpower the dish, so we're going to put about half the amount. Alright, tomatoes are done. Let's start with some garlic. Let me just get a random amount of cloves here. And we'll get to cutting these. Now these ones I'm not going to cut in half because that's just too big. I'm just going to cut these ones in small, thin slices. I'm not going to dice them, just thin slices like this is good enough. Ideally, they should all be about the same thickness, but I'm no chef, so they're kind of unique, let's just say that. Like I said in the last video, any dish that can have garlic pretty much does whenever I make it, because it's just really good. I love it. Garlic and onion especially, some of the best vegetables to exist. The only thing I don't really like about garlic is how it makes your hands sticky when you work with it. But other than that, I mean, no real issues. You can just wash it off. Honestly, I'm not even sure if I need any more. I'll do maybe one more big clove. Other than that, I think we have a fairly good amount of garlic now. Cool. So, now that we're done with that, we're going to move on to the olives. Let me just separate these out really quick. Okay, so the olives. Normally I like to drain them, but there's not that much liquid in the bottle, in the jar this time. So I'm just gonna grab more because the olives have to be in greater quantity than the garlic, because most of the salt is going to come from the olives, since I, like I mentioned in my previous video, tend to make food that is not very salty. And I mean, I don't mind it, but don't get me wrong, I do like salt as much as the next guy, but too much is not good, so I'd rather do too little than too much. I'm actually going to drain the rest because there's a bit more liquid than I initially expected. Let's cut what we have, and let's see how many olives we'll get in comparison to the tomatoes and the garlic. Okay, I think we can probably do the rest. I love olives. Alright, all the vegetables are done. Now we can move on to step 2. We are going to need to boil some pasta, so I'm going to fill up this pot with some water almost all the way to the screws here, and we're going to salt it slightly. Okay, now that it has water in it, we're going to turn on the stove on high, and we're going to begin frying the vegetables. I don't know why I said it like that. I don't like to use that much oil, so that should hopefully do it. And we're going to heat them on medium heat. And because of the nature of olives and garlic being harder materials than the tomatoes, we're going to put the tomatoes in later. We'll just spread these out nicely and leave them in the pan until it heats up. I had to switch out my battery because I was using this camera all day. But again, don't forget to lightly salt your water before putting pasta in it, otherwise it just doesn't really taste too good. Then again, I've made this without salting the water at all before because I forgot, and I had no issues. But if you like saltier pasta, then I would suggest you do that at least a little. So, here we are. The pan is finally warming up. We don't want to cook it, till it's burnt, obviously. We just want to kind of make the garlic a little bit crispy. Yeah, so just like the other food I made earlier, my spicy noodle recipe, this is really simple to make, and I make it pretty often. And like I said, it's one of my favorites, if not my actual favorite food of all time. While we're waiting on those, I'm going to open my box of pasta. I'm not going to put any in yet, obviously, the water's not boiling, but this is the one I'm using now. Some angel hair pasta. And one problem I have with, making pasta is I always tend to make a little more than necessary, but we'll see how that goes when I'm done here. Don't want to let this burn, because burnt oil isn't healthy, and burnt food is also not healthy. Even if it might taste good, it's not worth it. So the garlic's starting to get a bit toasty now. It's starting to brown a little, which is kind of a good sign. We don't want it to turn black though. So I'm going to turn off the heat now, and since we're effectively almost done with this, what I'm going to do next is add the tomatoes. It's going to be a bit weird to do it from camera, but there we go. The tomatoes have been added. So I turned off the heat because the tomatoes don't have to cook for a while. What I like to do is squeeze the tomatoes so some of their juices get out, because then it adds a bit more flavor to the... it's not really sauce, but it's kind of like sauce. So the more you squeeze, the more tomato flavor there will be among the olives and the garlic. And again, you don't want it to burn, so while you're squeezing them, you need to keep stirring every now and then. And the liquid also helps it from burning because, well, you're not adding any more oil, so you gotta add the water from the tomatoes. This is basically done. I'm just gonna squeeze a few more. Give it a little stir. You can kind of see how there's some tomato juice there. Very nice. And then we can pull it off to the side. Ow, that got a bit warm. I'm good. And there we go. We're done with that for now. And now the water's boiling, so we can add the pasta. Again, I think I said this earlier, I don't always measure the amount of pasta very well. Should be enough. And what I like to do normally is rip it in half. I know all the Italians that may or may not be watching. Realistically, they're not watching. But if they are, they're probably seething that I ripped the pasta in half. But it just makes it a little more convenient. So, sue me, I guess. Just make sure you give the pasta a little bit of a stir when you put it in. And now we're just gonna let it boil for a few minutes. Also, one thing that I like to do on the vegetables is, if you have some, to pour some garlic powder. I like to put a lot because I love garlic, and it'll kind of act like salt in a way, just adding a little more flavor. So that's nice. The pasta is boiling nicely. It's starting to soften up. Again, I like to get them just a little al dente. So let's do the test. No, they're still a little on the stiffer side. That's okay. We'll just leave them in. Oh no. I keep dropping stuff on the burners. I'll give it probably a few more minutes, and then I'll strain it. Alright, like I mentioned last time, we're going to turn on the cold water, and then we're going to strain it. Give it a quick rinse, and then drain the water out. Alright. And then all we do is add it to the veggies. Just like that. And then all that's left to do is give it a nice stir. Make sure all of it's mixed well, make sure the garlic powder's nice and absorbed. And then the food is done. Simple as that. Really easy to make. Doesn't take very long at all. Well, it turns out the camera battery I switched to just like doesn't really hold much of a charge, so that's why there's a brief cut and suddenly I'm done. But here it is. And now it's time for the taste test. Let's get one of everything. Yeah, that looks good. And as expected, I really like it. It's simple, not very salty. Highly recommended if you enjoy food that isn't particularly salty. And I mean, you don't even need oil to cook the vegetables. You could use water. It's just a bit easier, I think, to do it with oil. So, yeah. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.